Hi, and thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of TNT The K-Cal Kids. I'm Ty Justice.
I'm Todd Fox.
And we're going to dissect more of our favorite cartoons from, the second renaissance of TV animation.
Or our yesteryear.
Our yesteryear, that's right. It's going to be fun either way. So today we're going to start out in the K-Cal Kids Classic Corner with Mickey's Rival. And this is a Disney animated short from 1936. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting for a few reasons. But do you remember the first time you ever saw that short?
Yes, and it was on K-Cal Kids. Mm-hmm. And it was very interesting because usually in the episodes I was accustomed to when they would show the Disney ones, the very early classics, because that was from what, 30-something?
36.
So when they would show it, Mickey's usually not the one getting the brunt end of things. Mm-hmm. He's usually winning, with Donald or Goofy or in any other situation. This time, he took some pretty good shots in this one, and and it was one of those where you felt bad for him.
Oh yeah,
because he was taking a lot of it. So I remember watching it and was just tripping out on it that way.
Yeah, and it's funny because in this episode, Minnie takes on the role of Olive Oyl. If you remember the Popeye cartoons,
correct?
Because Olive Oyl, she just did not seem like a good girlfriend. She was always like rooting for the bad guy. And in this situation, this short is about one of her old boyfriends or old flames or schoolmates shows up in his like roadster, his sportster, his like, drop top, his convertible car. And he's a real jerk, and he's a real jerk to Mickey. Mm-hmm. And she's just kind of like, oh, he's wonderful. You're just jealous. She's telling him all that. It's just kind of infuriating. You're like, this jerk comes out of nowhere and is treating your boyfriend like trash. And you're just like all for it.
Yeah, and this was crazy because this was probably one of the first cartoons featuring Mickey and Minnie on a date, sort of like a picnic / date
in color.
Yeah. In color, yeah, because they've done since then a lot of them. They have a ride about it now at Disneyland, Goofy's Wild Train Ride or something like that, or their picnic, whatever.
Right.
Anyway, the point of it starts out in a wholesome setting where they're just having a nice little date, and like you said, it's like the prototypical, my old classmate who's made it big.
Right.
And, maybe Minnie was like the girl in high school that everyone wanted, but Mickey got her. Mm-hmm. And now he's coming around just trying to flex on Mickey, trying to show like, hey, he's got the car, he's got the look, he's got the muscle. And yeah, you do feel bad for Mickey.
So this is kind of like a Disney Red Pill moment. Because with Mickey, so like it almost makes it seem like, put it into that context, it almost seems like Minnie settled for Mickey because you know what I'm saying? Like he wasn't the favorite. And, he's got a junk car that even in the short, the anthropomorphized cars, can't keep up. Like Mickey's little junker can't keep up with Mortimer Mouse's like sports car.
Yeah.
And which is kind of sad. But, the gist of the short is that Mortimer acts like a big jerk. He tries to aggravate this bull that's in a nearby pen and aggravates it to the point where it breaks out because at one point he doesn't realize that the gate is open, so he taunts the bull until it charges and starts going after Minnie and everyone, and then he just jumps in his car and leaves like a coward.
Yeah.
And then Minnie has to depend on Mickey to save her, which he does because it's a Mickey Mouse short, and saves the day. But, and she's like, oh, my hero, all that stuff. But the funny thing about Mickey that they realized, that Walt realized, because the cartoons at that point, the Mickey cartoons have been going on for years. They started in black and white, and there's a lot of black and white Mickey shorts. But they realized that they couldn't let Mickey be a jerk. Mm-hmm. So he could be put upon, but he still had to be the hero. Now, they realized that Donald could do that, and that's why Donald actually became more popular in the 40s, more popular than Mickey Mouse for a split second. But they couldn't allow him to do anything, or Mickey Mouse, they couldn't allow Mickey to do anything mean or nasty or
mischievous
because Donald would aggravate and he would start things.
Yeah,
especially with Chip and Dale. He was kind of a dick.
He was very much a dick.
And, and I love Donald, but that character, but yeah, he was kind of a jerk, but he could do that. Mickey couldn't get away with it. And the funny thing is, even in his iteration or his initial creation, Mortimer Mouse was a precursor to Mickey because Mortimer was designed first, but it was decided that he was too jerky of a character and he wouldn't really fly. So then Walt had to come up with another character. And this was right after the time period that he lost Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, a character that he created to Universal.
So these were like supporting characters in a sense
Well, with
to Oswald.
So no, what happened was after. It's interesting though that you ask, and it's a good question because what happened was after he lost Oswald, he had to come up with a new character. So this was in search of a new character, in search of a new Oswald. So what he did was created Mortimer Mouse first, and nobody really liked that. So he created Mickey Mouse after that. But he was like the proto Mickey.
Well, my question to this is, yeah, he does kind of look like Mickey, but he definitely has a Latin background, and maybe the executives or his buddies in the drawing industry or his company when he first started was maybe that's not going to fly because again, this is way back. I mean, like
36.
Could they have made a character, even if he is a jerk, to be a prominent character in Mickey's universe? With that kind of Latin background, maybe would people accept it back then?
Well, the funny thing is, the Latin craze was going full force and whole hog in Hollywood. So even though Mortimer didn't seem like a I never saw him as a Latin character. I saw him. There's certain stylings though, and I think with the mustache, again, that was more of a Latin thing. That was a silent film era kind of look, but it was based on like Valentino, and they tried to make all these movie stars look very like Latin and dark. The Latin lover was a big thing. So, and it was still in full force. So I think there are elements of that, but even Walt himself had that mustache. And if you look at the character, it's said that he was drawn to look like Walt. So he's kind of like, long and scraggly and just, if you kind of look at it and squint a little bit, you're like, oh, maybe so.
Now I'm seeing it.
Right?
Yeah.
But for me, I always saw this, and maybe this is just me conflating two different things, but I always saw it as kind of like a rivalry between Mickey and Mortimer, but also a rivalry between Walt and Art Babbitt. So Art Babbitt was, of course, an artist at Disney. He was the second highest paid person on the lot because there was Walt, and then there was who was getting like $500 a week, and then there was Babbitt, who was getting like $250 to $300, depending on what source you cite and what time period it was. But by the 40s, he was making half of what the boss was making. He was the highest paid artist, but he was the antithesis of Walt. He was kind of flashy. He drove a convertible. And he, was a ladies' man. But I always felt that this was like a subtle dig at him because I always felt Walt was jealous of that because, Walt, drove sensible cars. He was a family man and he had different ideas when it came, I think, when it came to morality, and which we see more in the strike era as both men showed their true colors. Art Babbitt as a man for the people and as an iconoclast, and Walt as more of a classist. Classic, more modern type CEO. But I always felt, and Art Babbitt had nothing to do with this short. He wasn't part of the team or anything like that. And he'd been working for Disney since like 32. So I think the art style might have been a dig because he also had that same look, same mustache. They all kind of wore it. So it very well could have been, a dig at Walt, a little playful dig at Walt and his look. But I always felt somehow that it was kind of an unspoken thing that he was kind of trying to get a dig in at Art Babbitt. Again, that's just from me, and that's just from reading the history between these two men. But it kind of felt that way because it kind of could look like Art Babbitt as well.
Yeah, it could have been, and a couple things, because it makes kind of sense when you know the background, like obviously you do. But what I got out of the cartoon was just the fact, like what you said earlier, how Minnie is just all over this guy as far as like, oh my God, he's so strong, and look at what he's doing with the chicken wings and doing the dance, and she's
Isn't Mortimer great?
Yeah, and then Mickey's like, yeah, he's swell, and he's got like the donut hole still over his nose, melting into the coffee.
Right.
He shocks him with a button. Like I thought that was genius when he's like, hey, do you like this button? And then he takes it off of him and says, here you go. He goes, do you want this one? He's like, no, and then he takes it and throws it, and then he's just totally dissing Mickey.
Yeah.
And then Mickey gets the idea of, hey man, I'm gonna take his buttons off his pants, and then he gets shocked.
Right.
So it's like
he's
nothing,
prepared.
Yeah. There's like nothing he could do, and even the car is taunting his jalopy,
right?
Like you said. So it's like he can't win at this point. And the other part of that episode, to finish up what I gotta say about it is,
for sure.
Did you notice when he originally teases the bull and goes to his right? They flash back to showing Mickey and Minnie, and then they go back to it. It seems like they turn the tape. and it's the same drawing of him teasing the bull, the bull making the same noise until it gets to the open gate.
Right.
And then the drawings change.
Right.
So there's that. If you notice really carefully, they kind of just like, okay.
Recycled.
Recycled a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting how it ends, and then she finally tells him at the end, "Oh, my hero." He finally gets vindicated, but he looks like such a sap all the way through until that part.
And when you think about it, going more Disney red pill, he kind of is a sap after. He's what we would call a simp. He simps for Minnie.
Mickey the Simp.
Mickey the Simp, which is sad but accurate in this short because, again, it reminded me of Olive Oyl. And there are articles about this that you can read online. But, yeah, Olive Oyl was not like a good girlfriend for Popeye. You know, she constantly had him prove himself to try and beat Brutus. She was always like, oh, who am I going to choose? And Brutus is a complete ass, you know, the whole time. And, you know, it just kind of reflected that. I don't know, maybe because the Fleshers at Paramount were the direct competitors to Disney. They were pretty much the only game in town besides Warner Brothers that were really, you know, early competitors for Walt. And I wonder if they took a bit of that relationship between Olive Oyl and Popeye because it always worked so well on screen and threw it into a Mickey short. Because I'm not sure if there are many other Disney shorts where Minnie's trying to make him jealous, or there might be. You know, there's a lot of them out there. But this one specifically, you know, and in the style of the 30s, which is always great.
And to tie in with the K-Cow kids, they actually, I remember one of the episodes where they were like, I think there was a rival between two of the kids, and it might have been Jason, the lead guy, that said, "Well, speaking of rivals," and then it went so you know, he locked in with their skit, the episode, the little cartoon. Yeah, they tied it in. So,
oh God,
yeah.
Show.
It was cheesy, but it was funny because the two kids were arguing and it's like, "Hey, let's not be rivals here." But speaking of rivals.
Oh God, that's hilarious. But no, I know they were creative in that show. They got, you know, it was corny but cute, you know, and it was fun. But that short, I remember seeing it during K-Cow Kids as well. I think that was probably the first exposure you and I both had to most Disney cartoons, most Disney shorts, and no, it was really good. But yeah, I can't unsee now. I'm tainted when it comes to like the Disney backstory and all that. I can't, you know, see anything without seeing like, you know, the confrontations behind the scenes, which were fascinating. But yeah, Art Babbitt to this day stays as one of my favorite artists.
Well, see, I got to ask you this: knowing your cartoon history and how much the knowledge you have of it, is this episode one of the first episodes that maybe had underlining Easter eggs in it?
That I'm aware of, no. And sometimes it's a subconscious thing. Sometimes so many things are happening behind the scenes. And in 1936, they were still at the Hyperion studio, I believe, and there was still a lot of like working shoulder to shoulder, and everybody was working so close that, you know, these things could have slipped in without them thinking. I mean, the fact that Mortimer looks like Walt, that was probably more of a conscious decision. You know, they were probably more aware of that. Okay. But because of everything going on behind the scenes, maybe the convertible is kind of the red herring for me. Like, you know, there's a lot of things that could have happened, but the convertible and Art Babbitt drove a convertible, and I think they were trying to mimic him, but it ended up looking more like Walt, even though it didn't sound like Walt, and Walt was doing the voice of Mickey, of course. So I don't know if it was something they did consciously, but it is a very interesting theory, you know, Disney conspiracy theories right here, folks. But it's funny for me to see that and kind of read into it a little bit because of what was going on behind the scenes. And things hadn't even really come to a head yet because the strike was years away. It was like at least 5 more years ahead of them before the strike broke out in the new studio in Burbank. And I just don't know if Walt kind of had these feelings about Babbitt at this time. I don't know if they started from the beginning, because sometimes
potential rivalry or
jealousy.
Yeah.
Because again, you know, Babbitt was kind of a ladies' man, you know, and he did his thing. He was, you know, a hotshot, cocky artist, and you know, was worth his weight in gold, and Walt knew it. That's why he paid him so much. But yeah, for me, this is a perfect example of Walt and Art Babbitt, you know, and Babbitt never really spoke about Walt until the 90s, right before he died. He never really like spoke out against Walt or their rivalries or whatever disagreements they had, until there was a biographer and he wrote a book called Walt Disney Hollywood's Dark Prince, or Disney Hollywood's Dark Prince, where he actually talked to Babbitt for the first time, and Babbitt opened up to him and spoke a little bit about it. But yeah, for years he really didn't talk about it. I mean, neither one of the men did. But you know, we all know Walt liked to hold a grudge. So yeah, there was that. But that was a good short. That was a fun one. It was beautifully animated. You know, from the rivalries of Mickey and Mortimer, and then the cars, the jalopy and the roadster. You know, it was fun. But yeah, it's interesting putting Minnie in the being kind of the agitator of this.
Yeah, but still coming out clean at the end.
Right, I know. Stuff like that would aggravate me even as a kid, because I'm like, that's messed up.
Yeah, because even the jalopy was risking it, trying to save Mickey and Minnie with the headlight, to antagonize the bull.
Yep.
So yeah, you're right. And then, so they both had to work together to save Minnie, and then of course she comes out clean as a whistle. Right. So
yeah, and yeah, it's like she's the one that started all this. If she would have just told Mortimer to buzz off, none of this would have happened in the first place.
Yep.
But we're not blaming Minnie, but we're blaming Minnie.
Yeah, it's all her fault.
It's all her fault. Mortimer is just a wild tool to be used, and she was the agitator. So Minnie was actually the villain, kind of like in Titanic. Rose is the villain when you really think about it. Mm-hmm. So Minnie, this one's on you. Now moving on to Animation Mecca, Saturday mornings. One cartoon in particular, which was actually a remake, reimagining, kind of caught our eye when we were kids and stuck with us and stuck with a lot of kids, and that was Alvin and the Chipmunks.
Yes.
It had such a catchy theme song that today is still catchy and fun. Sometimes I play it, and I played it for my mom, and she had never seen it before, because like our parents weren't really paying a lot of attention to everything we watched, unless it was offensive. Then like 6 miles away, they'll come running home and go like, "What are you watching?" Mm-hmm. But no, when it came to the innocent stuff, there was so much, and we had a lot to watch. So, but she saw that and she's like, "Oh yeah, I grew up with Alvin and the Chipmunks." I go, no, this is a different one. This is the one from the 80s, and I think it went from 83 to 1990. And the one she grew up with was 61 to 62, the Alvin Show.
Yeah.
But the funny thing is, the creator of it, his name was Bagdasarian. He created the original Chipmunks album because, with the high-pitched voices and, Christmas Don't Be Late. And then they created the cartoon show, which lasted like a season or two, or it lasted for 2 years. But he died years before Alvin and the Chipmunks in the 80s, where it really took off. But his son actually produced it through his father's company. So his son and his daughter-in-law produced Alvin and the Chipmunks, the ones we grew up with.
As far as that one song with Christmas, how I think it was John, right, was the father?
Christmas, don't be late. Christmas, don't be late. Yeah.
That was way back before that,
50s,
right?
60s, yeah. That was what got him to
That one's always a legend to listen to, or like one of the go-tos during Christmas time. When you celebrate, you play that by the fire or whatever. But the new adaptation was pretty good because you got to meet his brothers. They had little things that they got involved with during the episode. They had to either, they were bouncing in and out of studio sessions or school. Alvin was a cool kid, the one that could be the lead. Mm-hmm. And then you had Simon, who was the smart kid, smart chipmunk, I should say. Yeah. And
Theodore, who was the glutton.
Who was a glutton, who was kind of be the butt of jokes or would do dumb things.
Right.
And then eventually...
Everybody has their curly.
Yeah, absolutely. And then eventually, I guess when the show was starting to go towards its end, they brought in the 3 other chipmunks, the female.
The Chipettes.
The Chipettes, yeah. But they would have those, in the show, they would always antagonize John or whatever, and like he would be mad at Alvin. He'd yell at him, say the iconic catchphrase, Alvin. Yeah, but they would do things, and then there'd always be some sort of mixture of where they would, like you say, pick up on a group song, make it their own. Mm-hmm. It could have been rock, it could have been like an early's like a hip hop song, but a clean version.
Right.
And it was stuff like that, and it was kind of like kids kind of dug it, like they thought, hey, this is pretty cool. And we saw a reimagination of that with the what's it called?
The movies,
the live action.
Yeah,
with them being animated, of course, which I thought was decent. The first one,
it was fun. Yeah, it was a fun movie.
But after that, it was like,
I got into sequelitis, unfortunately. But
the first one was okay.
It's funny. It's sad to think that the creator didn't get to live long enough
to see it blow up.
Yeah, to see it blow up like it did. He was only in his 50s when he passed away. He was still relatively young, and the funny thing is with the 80s series, it was the show initially. It was, let me see, it was Bagdasarian Productions in association with Ruby Spears Enterprises, which made the Superman cartoon from the 80s. So they did that from 83 to 87, and then Murakami Wolf Swenson in 88, and DIC Entertainment from 88 to 90.
I remember that one when it would pop up. My sister would giggle, and then I'd be like, "What's so funny?" And then later on, I was like, "Oh, Dick."
That's it's funny. It's true, but when they went to the DIC Entertainment, they changed the name of the show to The Chipmunks as opposed to Alvin and the Chipmunks. And with a lot of these shows, they did retool them after a while to try and keep them going. They did that for a long time with shows in the 60s to kind of give them more life. But this one was more because it gave them new adversaries per episode. I mean, antagonists, I should say, which were the girls. So they had the girls come in, which, each of the Chipettes were mirror images, basically, of the Chipmunks. And it gave them something new to go on, but they were created in like in 86 during the sort of middle run of the show. And then it wasn't until 88 where they changed the name and incorporated them in all the episodes. So it was the girls and their caretaker. So it was kind of a whole new mix to kind of like inject it with new life. And it lasted for about 2 years after that. So it gave them something. It gave them something. But it was more inclusive that way. And they were trying to get more girls, I think, to watch a lot of these shows, than probably already did. Because it was, usually cartoons were for all kids. But in the 80s, late 80s, they wanted to incorporate that more, make it a little more, accessible to little girls, which, I get it. And it's great for merchandising, too.
Yeah, they probably did a study and were like, well, there are quite a few girls that watch this, so let's incorporate them. Because that's how usually those would go. They'd go with studies, case studies.
Yeah.
They just, interview a lot of kids or have a lot of kids watch certain cartoons or say, hey, man, do surveys, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But, yeah, that definitely got an angle for them to have, like, female groups sing, those Chipettes actually go after female groups as far as like, or even I seen an episode where the Chipettes did like a Madonna song and they had the other two Chipettes.
Was it Like a Virgin?
No, it wasn't Like a Virgin. It was more of one of her wholesome songs if she had one. But
that's hilarious when you think about it.
Yeah, I know, right? But they did do a lot of things like that to where, you can incorporate now a female voice, and you had that, I keep saying the same thing too. Alvin and the Chipmunks, cheering them on, promoting them, things like that. Or even where I saw one where they raveled each other. They were doing some sort of like it was some
competition.
Sort of, competition.
That was the movie I think they did, because they did an animated movie. That might have been like a TV movie, but I think it might have been that one. I could be wrong, but yeah, that was a big thing. Yeah, and the funny thing is, because when you think about it, they were missing out on like half of the bands out there. Because think of all the '80s girl bands out there and the rockers of that era, and putting the girls in there was a smart idea, because then they could license other music and really pull in all the pop culture phenomenon that was going on, like you said, Madonna, even Heart, and all those Joan Jett, and all the big '80s female rock stars. So I can definitely see why that would have worked, because they were tapping into the zeitgeist of the time when it came to rock and music, and bringing an already musical show, giving it a more well-rounded feel, and giving it just more opportunities to make money.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You want to push it as far as you can, and that's a better way to do it, because you can involve more music. And then, like you said, and it's funny too, because you would think that there would be only like the whole dancers / just performers on the mic, but when it came down to music that had instruments that wasn't like with DJs in the background, some of the Chipmunks, whether female or male, would be playing instruments. It's like, I didn't know they were keyboardists too.
Right.
They're drummers as well.
They would support them.
Yeah, exactly.
That's true. Yeah, it was an interesting show. It was fun, but it made
a couple times Alvin was on guitar.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, I remember that. It was a great little show. Music every episode, I think, or
they tied it in somehow.
Yeah, but a lot of shows of the '80s did that. I'll talk about Garfield and Friends at some other point. But definitely, it had. It definitely had its tie-ins, and it was just so popular because of the music that was popular at the time. And shows like that just were so intensive. It wasn't just the animation. We've talked about this before, but it wasn't just the animation. It was also the writing the songs, composing them, adapting them, getting the actors to, really sing every episode. I mean, it was really labor intensive when you think about it.
Yeah.
There was a lot going on behind the scenes, and those shows, it was amazing. They produced so many so fast.
Extra production for all those episodes.
Yeah, and there was a lot of shows in the 80s that did that. And it was an interesting transitional period for cartoons, but you really got a lot of work, blood, sweat, and tears put into these shows.
And that's a thing too that's not discussed about, and I'm glad you brought it up right here, about 80s cartoons in general, because of what the limited stuff they had at the time compared to just a half decade later in the 90s, where it was a lot easier to produce and to make these in mass production.
Right.
But in the 80s, you really had to work really hard. And so like if a cartoon series did not succeed or did not hit expectations, man, that was a tough loss for those all involved.
And even though a show may have sucked, let's say that, even if a show wasn't good, if a company had gone through the process of creating a syndication package of cartoons, like, well, it's 65 episodes, we'll rerun it for a couple, 13 weeks twice a year, we'll still make our money off of it. That's why a lot of shows survived, I think, that weren't too good, because they made a ton of them, and they're like, well, we're just going to keep it going because we already invested this. It wasn't even as much about story. And I've said this before on a previous episode that, once they had their 65 episodes, and it doesn't matter how big the show was, the next season would probably only be about 10 episodes more, 11 episodes more. They would not do season 1 65 episodes, season 2 65 episodes. No, they never did that, because unless it was like a monumental hit, but even then they wouldn't produce that much for the second season, because it just wasn't financially viable for companies to do that. But once they had their rerun package going, the syndication package, they were fine. And if they could squeeze a little more money out of you, then they'd give you a couple more episodes.
True. And that was the thing back in the day, but obviously it got easier in the 90s, but in the 80s you had a whole laundry list of things you needed to do to get to those 65 episodes. And if you got there and it worked, kudos to you. But if not, like I keep looking back at all the shows that, because there's a few cartoons that we'll probably have an honorable mention as we go along that we might bring up from the 80s that you're like, oh yeah, I remember that one, but it was brief. Like the Superman one, when we first talked about about that one an episode or so ago, it, like, I was like, dude, I did watch a few of those episodes, but it just never caught, like pulled me in, So, yeah, and the amount of production that was put into that one, you broke it down, that episode. It's like, yeah, I do feel for those people, because if you put so much money into a project like that, you run the risk at failing, obviously. But when you do fail, you run the risk at not being given another chance. Yeah. Or you might be in that genre of people like, hey, I don't want to work with that guy because, maybe Todd, when he was working on that project, did something to goof it up, or he's responsible for that flop. Do we really want him on this project? Maybe he's bad luck. Right.
So if you don't want that to happen to us, folks, remember to like, share, subscribe, and comment the crap out of these videos.
Yes, we need more comments.
Yeah, because we want to work again.
Yes.
But no, you're absolutely right. And it's sad when shows like that don't do well. It's not as visible a medium as like a TV show that fails, or a showrunner that, goes and does like horrible work on TV, or like an actor. This is the sad thing about actors. Like if you have enough, like 3 bad movies in a row, you'll never work, or it'll be much harder for you to find work. Hopefully, luckily for the people behind the scenes in animation, you can kind of, do different things, because animators are people that do animation. A lot of times they weren't just animation directors. A lot of these guys were animators. These people are storyboard people, you know what I mean? So they can kind of transition into different departments. But yeah, but you never wanted to be part of a show that failed when you put your heart and soul into it. And I think, that did happen with the Ruby Spears Superman, and it's unfortunate, because if they went a slightly different direction, could have been great. But even, a couple of years later, there was new animation on the horizon, and we have like Batman the Animated Series. We have shows like that have the Fleischer Superman from the 40s to thank, because they were told, like, make it in the 40s style. We'll get into that when we start talking about Batman. But they did a lot of good things, but even then in the 90s, they were still going through the syndication package process, because that's why the first season of Batman the Animated Series was 65 episodes for the most part, like 65, and then they did another season, or they did another batch of episodes. I think the total number was 85 episodes for basically the first kind of run before they went to the Batman and Robin Adventures, and then, the Gotham Knights episodes that revamped. But no, this show went through a little bit of a transition, didn't change all that much. It added the girls, but which I think was a great idea. It's a boon because it wasn't just like, well, let's just add girls. They were adding a whole repertoire of music and hits that were big at the time. Like you said, Madonna was big. You had Sheila E. in the 80s, and you had all these huge musical giants that were really breaking down a lot of walls. Cyndi Lauper was big with them because because I remember stuff
but
like that.
But I think they were caught up in a bad time too, because when they were in that whole Ninja Turtle era of when movies and everyone was like, the surfer dude was cool, so that's why Alvin dresses the way he does.
Yeah,
he dressed, and then they got baggier clothes as the show went on to fit the early 90s. And the things were changing. So when they were still, their catchphrases were like dude and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It was kind of like getting pushed aside once the early 90s came, and it was more hip hop like slang. It was more hip hop like catchphrases. They tried that, and I think that's where they kind of failed. They kind of lost me there a little bit because they didn't stay true to their roots, but it is what it is. Times changed. Kids grew out of it. That wasn't a show that you would expect to go 8 years or something.
Right. And it didn't lend itself to hip-hop necessarily. And that was hard. See, that was an interesting thing that shows did try to do that. Garfield and Friends had an introduction because every few years they would change the intro a little bit. Mm-hmm. But with Garfield and Friends, it's never included in the releases on home video, on DVD, or anything like that. They did a rap. They actually did an introductory Garfield rap, and it was it's cringy to watch now. You should look it up. It's online. It's on YouTube somewhere, but it is very awkward. And looking back now, you're like, oh man, that's when appropriation goes terribly, terribly wrong. And again, Chipmunks, those shows are Caucasian oriented, you know what I mean? It's not like you're doing Static Shock, or you're not doing The Proud Family, where you have black actors, black creators who understand the culture. You know what I mean? You have an industry that's trying to adapt too quickly without understanding. Like, maybe we should talk to some black folks about this.
Yeah, let's
get their opinion.
Let's try to see if we have a core audience that will accept this, or do we need to change it? If we need to change, let's talk to some people that are familiar with that culture.
Let's talk to people that aren't just white and off-white. Let's try people that are, again, black, Latino. If you want to go there, talk to these people. They're on your staff. You know what I mean?
Yeah, mix it up.
We're all going to be everywhere. Mm-hmm. So, it's something they did not do, obviously, because it's really tone deaf in a lot of ways, but it didn't really pan out for a lot of shows that tried to do that, again, because they didn't hire the black talent to do it or consult black talent, which would have helped them a lot. But, the shows later on, of course, like I said, The Proud Family and black-oriented shows did it right because, they had black showrunners or they had black creatives involved, and, they're the first people that are going to tell you that's not right. So,
if an executive says, no, I really need him to say dude, they're like, no.
Can he just say brother? No.
Let's find a go-between.
I know. Let's fix this. But no, and it was unfortunate, but it lasted. It had a good run. I mean, these shows in the 80s really had a long lifespan. Some of them, for a show to be like 7-8 years, like Muppet Babies that we talked about before, it actually is a good run. So, because they did their thing.
To the mid to late 90s, I mean, all across America, for the most part, you still had a lot of channels like that weren't cable, because obviously you were starting to get the cable Cartoon Networks and stuff like that. Nickelodeon, but they had their own stuff. They really didn't grab the IPs that were out or whatever unless they got the rights later. But for the most part, you had your Saturday morning cartoons with CBS or with ABC, with Fox, and then you had the afternoon blocks as well. So these cartoons could have a shelf life because there was the room. Yes, you had competition. Yes, you had all kinds of other cartoons out there. But imagine with those blocks being there and also cable, there was a lot of room. If you had a halfway decent to decent show, it was a good opportunity to get that ran. And for a good while.
You're absolutely right. And it really served them well because the show was popular. Alvin and the Chipmunks was popular.
Toys.
I mean, my God, I want to look into that. I'm like, I want to see if they have like nice little stuffed plushies of the Chipmunks.
Oh, there was definitely plushies because my sister had a bunch of them.
Oh, see, those are cool.
She liked those. She liked Alvin and the Chipmunks a lot. So she had the plushies. She had the little mini action figures.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so she did have a few of those. I mean, they didn't come with anything, just in their outfits or stuff. But she did like the Chipmunks.
It's not like the Ghostbusters, where those toys were a trip.
They
came with everything. We'll talk about that when we get on the real Ghostbusters.
A lot of small choking hazards.
That's what all those toys were. So were Micro Machines. I mean, those are definitely built to kill kids. I mean, you don't like your child? Get them a bunch of these.
Dude, I had my fair share of those.
Oh my
I
God.
had a lot of them.
I know guys that collect them. They have like bins full of micro machines. They just love them. And as a kid, they're really cool. They're, you know.
One of my favorite ones was like a little Camaro, and you would touch the bottom of the wheels like ever so gently, and the headlights would light up, and it would go beep beep.
Really?
Yeah, those are
These
like
things are like an inch long.
yeah, they're so small, dude. Like I had a little tin, and I must have had almost 100 cars in there. Wow. Yeah.
I was going to make a joke. I'm like, man, they're only an inch long. It's like a politician's ambition. That's crazy. Sorry.
Or manhood.
Or manhood. There we go. Won't have to cut that out at all. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, the only sad thing was that Ross Bagdasarian Sr. didn't get to see his creation really become this hit TV show, because his show Alvin, or what is it, the Alvin Show, in the 60s was cute, and it was of the time, very of that period in the 60s where the animation was very simple but clean. It was kind of like a UPA style animation, but it's sad that he didn't get to see it blow up like it did, because in the 80s it was huge.
Yeah, it is sad, but it's good that his kids kept his thing going, his IP going, when they could have just dropped it and said, okay, whatever.
No, that's true. And it's a good thing that they got the money from that. They got the benefit from it, because so many times when somebody creates something, it's sold off, the kids don't have it anymore, and it's kind of a tragedy. But when it stays in the family like that, that's a really kind of a fun story, and it was a good wholesome show. It was a fun show. And
yeah, because by now it's like, hey, grandpa's IP still going.
Yeah. And of course, the reason it's not out anywhere is because of all the different IP they used. Because back then it was fun to parody and do all that, but now everybody's so litigious that you can't release it on home video or like on platforms like Disney Plus, really, as far as I know, because then you'd have to pay a lot of licensing fees, and nobody wants to do that these days, and everybody has an ironclad grip on whatever they see as theirs. But at the same time, I wonder how much the kids own. I wonder how much, if they still own the rights to the Chipmunks, I wonder how much of a grip they have on the rights to the show.
Well, if they did sell off the rights, I hope they got a nice chunk of money, but I hope they worked in the residuals.
Yes, hopefully so. I mean, which is unfortunate with this show. They won't
Not
get
as
anything
much,
because they're not going to see
but
it.
Maybe they'd see something from like a movie, like if they were to reimagine it again.
Yeah, or like the movies they did, the live action movies from a few years ago.
Hopefully they got some money out of that.
Yeah, but no, there's a lot of great memories with that show. Dance, because a lot of times when you grew up with those shows, you'd dance to the theme songs. I did, and it was embarrassing now, but to think about it. But yeah, I was just this uncoordinated kid dancing to the Chipmunks theme, the DuckTales theme.
Well, see, I wouldn't dance because I'm white and I have no I have two left feet, so
I have a lot of Irish and English, so and German. So all I know how to do is either be taken over or take over small countries. So, but no, there's a little Latin in there too. So no, the rhythm wasn't great. Let's just say. So I think we would have been like equal when it came to that.
Possibly, but I think you just had more testicles to do it actually out in front of people. Me, I'm like, nah, you know what? I'll hum it. That's about it. But I'm not gonna dance to it. Dude.
I think a neighbor saw me dancing to the DuckTales theme one time, and I was like shocked. I was just like, and I stayed inside for days.
You weren't shaking your tail feather while it was like, doom, doom, doom.
Yeah, I was, and it was unfortunate. I'm glad we didn't have like cameras in her. My neighbors are too poor to have cameras. None of us had them then.
It would have gone viral.
Yeah, exactly, for the worst reasons. But thank goodness. I feel bad for the kids today. Everything's getting recorded. They can't have any privacy.
No.
But no, that was a great show and a great memory. But now I think we should move along to Running Home After School, because there's one really cool show that we've talked about before that I really love.
These are good segments.
And took to. Thank you. It's great because I think we have a shared interest in this, and I think we have our different opinions and angles that really make this stuff whole.
Me and you, whether we did things different, I was playing sports. You might have been playing action figures. I was playing action figures. Me and you probably did Hot Wheels, whatever, imaginary dragon stuff with fake weapons as sticks.
And we were both poor together. So
yeah, we were both poor together, but I mean, we had similar backgrounds to where it's like, okay,
similar interest,
yeah, when we're out there playing, this is what that segment's about. It's like, well, wait a minute. We look at our McDonald's watch, which we used to get in the Happy Meals, that says 4 o'clock. Oh shit. It's 4 o'clock. Let's go run and we'll watch a cartoon.
Exactly.
That's what we'd run home for.
That's true. And, when you look back, my mom would do that too. There were certain shows where she would literally run from school to go see. So, kids do that.
All the way back.
All the way back, man. I mean, these things were uniquely our own. I think that's another aspect too. I think so much of this was uniquely for us. in an era with my mom, in her era, there was a lot of stuff uniquely for kids. But in the 40s, pre-World War II, and even slightly after, that really didn't happen until TV came along.
Yeah.
So, kids didn't really have a lot that was just for them in terms of entertainment. So when that did start happening, and in 1950 you had Crusader Rabbit, and later on, by the Jay Ward Show and all that, kids, really started to get interested in you. Howdy Doody, you had these shows that were specifically aimed at children. When good quality shows started coming around, man, kids just took to it, because before that, you had like the cartoons in the theater, but they were kind of for everybody. They weren't made for kids. They weren't made only for kids. When you had stuff that was just for you, it was special.
Yeah, you had show times with those shorts that you could say, okay, if I can't make the 5 o'clock, there's a 6 o'clock. There was not really reruns back in the day. Mm-mm. Like my dad talks about radio shows. He used to run home to listen to Green Hornet.
That's right.
Yeah, he's
radio.
Dragnet, stuff like that. I mean, those were his favorites. So I mean, same thing with television. We didn't have the reruns. So we knew they came on at a certain time. Got to get there.
Yeah, but luckily when we were kids, we did have reruns.
Well, yeah, maybe.
But when your father was a kid, yeah, they didn't have that as much. Yeah, that's the joke in Back to the Future, when he goes back and he's sitting with his mom when she's a teen, and they're watching Jackie Gleason. And he's like, I love this. It's a rerun. One of the kids goes, "What's a rerun?"
Yeah.
And this is like in '55. But yeah, your father. Yeah, that's right. Radio shows were big. They were the TV shows of the time.
Yeah, he used to, what was it, Texas Rangers? Tales of the Texas Rangers.
Like you said, Green Hornet.
Green Hornet. He loved
Superman.
Dick Tracy. He loved Dick Tracy.
Yeah.
So I mean, my dad was all into that kind of stuff as a kid.
See, and that's why I think they allowed it for us, because they're like, well, we had our stuff, now they have theirs. Yeah. But yeah, that's right. That kind of started in the 30s. That was the serialized stuff. I forgot about that. That's true. But when it came to like TV, yeah, you really had a different like addition to all that. But yeah, kids really would run home to listen and watch their favorite stuff, and we were no different. So when this show came on, I remember it was a big thing. It was a big countdown, and that was for Darkwing Duck.
Yeah.
And Daring Duck of Mystery. And I remember the countdown specifically. So like and for a kid, time is different. Time clocks differently. And, a week is like a month. It's like forever. Mm-hmm. And a school day is just never ending. And they would do this thing where the kids would dance to the music, and they'd have the big number like 9 more days, 8 more days. And every day they would continue the countdown during the Disney afternoon block.
Yes.
So every time you'd watch, they'd be talking about, Darkwing's coming, and it was just this big thing, and it would drive me nuts because it felt like it was never going to get here.
I do remember one because, again, KCAL, if you YouTube KCAL kids, you try to find it, you'll find a bunch of things on KCAL, the channel. Mm-hmm. And their graphics were kind of advanced at the time
TV
compared
graphics,
to other, TV graphics compared to, like, even their news and stuff like that was a little advanced than the national ones, right? But I bring that up only to say that I do remember that countdown. And I remember they would show, I don't know if you remember, but they would show a little glimpse of something from the cartoon.
Yeah.
And I remember they did not show the face, but you saw his hat and cape covering with his arm like that.
Oh, I don't remember that.
And it was towards almost the end of the countdown. It was like either 3 or 2.
It was brilliant.
And so I was just like, dude, I wonder what this show is.
Yeah.
And I was locked in, like, dude, like, I was the same way. I was like, of all the Disney cartoons that were on at the time, I was a fan of each one, and now they're introducing a new one to the block, and it's like, and I think that was the first introduction.
Yeah.
Out of the first 4, that was the first introduction of a new cartoon coming to the block, and
right.
And so I don't remember if KCAL kids hit on it or not, but I do remember seeing the advertisements in between.
Yeah, the commercial break. Yeah, and those would, like I said, they would drive me crazy. They were just, really, they would build a lot of anticipation. And that was so smart, because I don't remember them doing that with any other show.
Nope.
And that one specifically, and that one ended up being a terrific show.
You think they knew they had a hit on their hands?
I think they did, because it was a certain combination of things, or like it's, DuckTales meets Batman, and all the cocaine in that boardroom. But I'm sure like they knew something, because it was well drawn, it was well executed, and it was funny, and it was fun. And the Rogues Gallery was pretty interesting as well.
Yeah, every good superhero needs good villains.
Yeah.
And he had good villains. Although quirky, they were still good.
Yeah, right. And some of them were really dark.
Yes.
They had some very dark characterizations, and that show even has a band episode. It's called Hot Spells, and we talked about that. I don't know if you had a chance to check it out.
No, I didn't get a chance
but
to check that
it's
one out.
kind of like Darkwing going with his girlfriend, who is kind of like like a female Dracula type character, or like a mix with like Lady Frankenstein or whatever. But,
Almost like what they call an emo chick today.
right? Yeah, exactly. She's early emo, and like they kind of go to hell in like a hell type thing. It's more like a Harry Potter. They go to a school of spells and things like that, and they have kind of like a devil character. And people called in and complained. So parents called in and complained about that, and it was never released. And that's why I don't think there's a complete. I don't think it's on Disney Plus. I'll cut this part out if it is, but I don't think it's on Disney Plus. And it was never released complete on home video because they did a release of DuckTales complete. Finally, they did Tailspin. I don't know if they completed Tailspin. They might have. Chippendales, they definitely did. But Darkwing Duck has never had a complete release, and that's because of that episode. And it's been banned for so long. But there were a lot of shows that did Halloween episodes like that. It wasn't just Darkwing Duck. Tiny Toon Adventures did Halloween specials, and stuff like that.
Tiny Toons, we get. I mean, the way
that'll come in.
Yeah, that'll come in, and so will I think. Because Tiny Toons just had so many things they did that were off the wall.
Yeah, and groundbreaking too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But I will say this, getting back to Darkwing though, when I first heard that intro, it kind of blew me away because, again, we had talked about this earlier. It had gotten into the urban side of things because kids were like, "Hey, man,
hip hop.
That's my music." And that was, I think, one of the first cartoons that embraced it, especially for Disney.
Yeah, that's kind of weird, but yeah, they did a good job.
Yeah, they did an excellent job. And I remember at my school, I was in a not so rich area. Like it was. We
grew up poor people.
Okay, yeah, I was trying to play with that one, but anyway, but for the most part,
embrace it.
Yeah, I'll embrace it. But a lot of my friends and a lot of the kids there loved it.
Yeah,
I mean, they sometimes they were singing the song too, and so.
Well, if I may, and I can cut this part out if you don't like this, or if you don't want to say, but wasn't it in like Compton?
Inglewood.
Yeah. So you had a lot of black friends.
Yeah, a lot of black friends, and they dug it. They were like, and again, I think it's cool because by Disney using characters that weren't, say for instance what Nickelodeon would do, actually using families and embracing cultures and stuff like that. That was groundbreaking in itself.
Yeah.
But you can get away with that on the Disney side by using animals in that
anthropomorphized creatures.
Yeah, creatures. But you can have them where you could be like, oh well, if he was a regular character, you know he's black or he's white.
Yeah.
And you can gravitate to certain characters without being supposedly favoritism or racist in a way, right? So
the actors too. You had black actors playing it, which happened every once. More with Gargoyles with Keith David
with the lead, yeah. But man, I was blown away because I went in that being excited to see what they were gonna do, but my inner side was like, man, this could suck.
Let's hope not. But
I want to embrace this character, whoever he is. But then when he came out, sort of like that Batman / a little bit of Superman, a little bit of every kind of like you can.
They had the bat plane kind of spoof.
Yeah.
They had the motorcycle, which is part of the intro, and then he comes out. Yeah, it was really cool.
And it really embraced too. I think is at the time Disney was embracing, like with DuckTales, broken families, but a different kind of family trying to stay together to make a family.
Yeah.
And here's another one that jumps in with a character who's having to take care of a child and stuff like that.
That's true. Yeah.
It was brilliant. I thought there were so many layers to this show, and I'm sure you'll get into it.
Yeah, and now that you mention it, I didn't even think about that, but this just popped into my head. The Dark Knight Returns had only been around for a couple of years at that point. It came out in 85, 86. And Batman's sidekick, or his Robin in there, was a redheaded girl.
Correct.
And in Darkwing Duck, Gosselin is a redheaded girl. And she had an attitude, which is maybe that's where they took that from. Instead of giving him a Robin that was a boy, they had this little girl who's in the pilot. Her grandfather, it's called Darkly Dawns the Duck, which is another thing I like about the show. It was all poultry related. He lived in Saint Canard, which is Canard is French for duck, and Drake Mallard is his alter ego, and Mallard is a subspecies of duck. And they kind of really went with the theme there. But in the pilot, her grandfather creates this machine, this weapon, and he's presumably dead. He dies, and the villain of it, Taurus Bulba, I think, the big bull, he tries to kidnaps her, tries to get the weapon and the code and all that. But yeah, in it, she is an orphan. He takes her in, just like a Robin character. And I didn't realize that there might have been, themes of The Dark Knight Returns in there, which is kind of fun. It's kind of cool. But yeah, I didn't think about that till you brought that up. I'm like, oh, that's right. That's really, it's a trip. But that's probably why they colored her hair the way they did, because it was colored just like the Robin in Dark Knight Returns.
And she did have the face, if you remember in the comic book, like it was like sort of like a simple nerdy type face.
Yeah.
And I could picture now putting the beak or, on her in the comics, and they would look almost the same without the pigtails.
Right. In spirit that we have our Robin, and because she was the sidekick.
She was, and she bailed him out a few times. Yeah. Also, she got kidnapped and he had to bail her out.
Right. Exactly.
So there was a lot of that going on too. And I just like their back and forth.
Yeah.
I thought it was really cool.
It really was. And this show would eventually become a spin-off of DuckTales, because Launchpad McQuack is in it, and he is his like right-hand man. That's kind of like his Alfred in a way.
Yeah, he repairs his vehicles.
Right.
Flies
the
them
plane.
around.
Yeah, flies the I don't even know what it's called, but Darkwing's plane. And the funny thing is, though, this did not start out that way. Originally, what this show was supposed to be was originally conceptualized as a James Bond DuckTales spinoff. So it would have been Launchpad McQuack, who was the comic relief in DuckTales. He would have been like a 007 James Bond type character. And they were going to call it 00 Duck or something like that, based on an episode or two episodes from DuckTales, actually. And it's interesting because, Tad Stones, the guy who created Darkwing Duck, swore up and down in 2016, it's not a spinoff. They're in different universes, which is nonsense.
Yeah.
It is absolutely a spinoff.
It's more like we talked about before in the last episodes, DuckTales was like in a San Francisco type area.
Right.
This was more like a New York style area,
Exactly.
very Gotham.
Yeah, it is very Gotham, and the two episodes from DuckTales that it's kind of based on is 00 Duck and the masked mallard, both things they kind of used in Darkwing Duck, because a masked mallard is one of the euphemisms that's used to describe Darkwing Duck, and like the Dark Knight, kind of things for Batman. But but unfortunately, the Broccoli people, or the people that owned James Bond or owned James Bond, owned 00. They owned the 00 wording, so they couldn't use that. So something had to be developed quickly. And so that's where Darkwing Duck came about, because somebody probably went, well, Batman's big right now. Instead of James Bond, the franchise, let's do Batman. And another side note that's kind of interesting about the James Bond world at that time, around 1990, is that they were in lawsuits and they couldn't make any films. This was part of that large gap of time where no James Bond film was made for like 7 or 8 years, because what had happened was there was a rights issue thing, and there was some fight, and Timothy Dalton, who actually really liked this James Bond, didn't get to do his third film. But there's actually a Disney connection to that too, because Timothy Dalton, instead of doing his third James Bond, which would have come out in 91, he did The Rocketeer, which is a Disney film that I love.
Oh, that's right.
And he was in that, but he wouldn't have been able to do that if he were playing James Bond necessarily. So that's where that came about. But during that whole time, they couldn't make a James Bond movie, and everything was so litigious about James Bond at the time. I don't think Disney wanted to touch that with a 10-foot pole.
That's when Pierce Brosnan came, right?
95. Yeah. Finally, everything was resolved years and years later.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was during that very interesting period. But it's funny that it was originally supposed to be a James Bond thing, a James Bond Duck. But instead, we got Darkwing Duck, which I think is a way better concept, and it's much more visually unique.
Yeah, the outfit was cool. The coloration was cool.
Purple.
Just everything, from his, he had the sort of the Ninja Turtles, eye band to masculate.
The fedora, and then he had the turtleneck, the turquoise turtleneck.
Yeah, he had the blaster.
That's right.
That also was like a batarang too.
Yeah, and it was like a grappling gun.
Yeah, grappling gun. Yeah,
exactly.
So he had his tool belt too. He had his things that he would use. So there was a little bit of everything in him, but he was really cool. And again, going back to what you were talking about before, it was like the LA Noire type, like that Batman later on turned into. It was sort of like, okay, you're in a modernized New York kind of, Duckville or whatever, but it's got like your classic cars,
Right.
It's got your people dressed in suits walking down the street. So it was definitely, I think, ahead of its time.
Right.
And I think if I remember right, that was probably towards the tail end when they were trying to phase out DuckTales as far as the reruns.
Yeah.
And on the block, they was going to replace eventually DuckTales.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it was going to definitely work with it, but at the same time, DuckTales kept doing well. And that's why they kept it kept
Extending
on for a couple of years.
yeah.
Because it ended in 1990. They stopped making episodes, but the reruns lasted for a couple of years.
Oh, absolutely.
But Darkwing Duck did do well. It didn't do as many episodes as DuckTales, but it had a respectable run as well. And it was a great show. It ran for 91 episodes as opposed to over 100. So it's still a lot because they did the syndication package and then they kept doing more. But the funny thing you mentioned about the suits and the style, because he does have like a double-breasted suit. He's wearing a double-breasted coat.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I wonder, and because a couple of years before that, just actually 2 years before that, Who Framed Roger Rabbit came out. And I'm sure that was a big influence for a lot of stuff, because that was a Disney film. That was a Disney collaboration.
Based in the late 50s, too.
Yeah, the late 40s, 50s.
40s, 50s,
yeah, you're right. That style.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure that's why that rippled into a lot of the shows that we grew up with, and maybe even lent influence to why they wanted to make Batman the Animated Series styled like the Fleischer's cartoons. Who knows? Spielberg and Disney, they have they did a lot for a lot of other shows that they're probably not even aware of.
Favorite villain on that show, if I may, real quick.
Oh God,
I had two of them.
Mm-hmm.
Now I can't remember. I don't know if his name was Electrode, but he had like the hat with the plug.
Yeah.
I liked him because he could be as mad scientist and just evil at one point, but then real goofy and clumsy at the same time. And then I liked towards the end of the show when Darkwing Duck had his sort of like the reverse Flash.
Negaduck.
Megaduck, right? Negaduck.
Negaduck, like negative duck.
Yeah, dude, that guy, he was cool, but he was super evil, man.
I like Negaduck. Yeah, Negaduck was super evil and dark. I liked him for that reason, because Darkwing was really quirky and funny and like,
loving, had a compassionate side.
Yeah, and he would get smashed a lot of times. But the other one was the water dog, the aqua dog.
That's right.
That was kind of a trippy one too.
Yeah.
All the things they would do with water.
Yeah, he would go through the sewers and all this other stuff and bring, like a tidal wave on or just flood this building and almost drown Darkwing. Yeah, dude, I forgot about him. He's a cool character.
They had him. They had the one that was kind of like I think a male version of Poison Ivy. It was like he was kind of a plant guy.
Yeah.
Sorry, we're not remembering all their names, but he had a very robust rogues gallery.
He did.
And that's what made him better, because again, he was kind of a comic relief superhero. He wasn't like serious, and he took himself seriously, which made it funny.
And I think that's what I appreciate about not only just the drawing back then, Ty, but the writing, but also everything that played in part of it. You have to have a good lead in with a good theme song, and they nailed it with that song. Mm-hmm. And then because you catch yourself singing it during the episode. Then you had good writing because you had a good storyline. Okay, this can happen. It doesn't seem too far fetched, and even if it is, it's not like out of the realms of possibility for a cartoon.
Right.
Then you had your evil antagonist. You had the sprinkled in comedy. To me, shows like that, especially the early days of the Disney block, they just worked because they all worked with the same premise. Like, it just seemed like they found the right ingredients for most of these shows.
No, that's true. And unlike the rest of the shows, this is another interesting thing. Unlike the rest of the shows, talking about like originality and things like that, DuckTales, Tailspin, Rescue Rangers, they all had to do with pre-existing characters, pre-existing IP from like the 50s and 60s and 40s.
Reimagined.
Darkwing didn't. It was actually completely original.
Brand new.
And that was kind of an interesting thing too when you look back. That was kind of the new kid on the block, because it wasn't based on anything pre-existing except for the supporting characters like Launchpad McQuack, who was created for DuckTales, if I'm not mistaken, and Blathering Blatherskite, Roboduck or Gizmo Duck.
Yes, if I could real quick, I'm sorry, Ty, but this is going to come up multiple times on episodes as we go along. Mm-hmm. When you helped me move to Memphis, and I had boxes of my old toys and old action figures that I took with me, the story about what happens with that. When we moved back here to California after a nasty divorce, she and me and her were on you pay it for 3 months, I pay it for 3 months, the storage till we can get it back over here. It was only supposed to be there for a year. Spoiler alert, she doesn't pay it for the second term. We lost out on all that stuff. Most of my Ninja Turtles did not make it back from here.
Oh, God.
I did keep most of them, but I did lose some of them. I lost all my Hot Wheels collection. I lost all my, what is it called? Exo Squad collection. I lost Spider-Man collection. My Disney collection is what I lost, and my McDonald's stuff that I had collected from all those cartoons over the years. I had a lot of those still in their little packages.
This guy has kids, so he had kids at the time, so he was saving them for the children.
Yeah.
I mean, and just even if not, I mean, like, that's still his
No,
collection.
I had some that were, that I would give to the kids, and then some I would keep. But the ones that I left, speaking of Darkwing Duck, I did have the action figures from both McDonald's and from KB Toy Stores, where I had the figurine of Darkwing Duck, Gizmo Duck, the Bolt guy. I had the Nega Duck. I had characters from DuckTales. Oh, man. All those gone, bro. So that brings. So when we talk about it, it's bittersweet. I love the memories. I miss my toys.
So I'm so sorry. So we haven't talked about this yet, and it's a very personal thing. But there was a time in our lives where not too long after we first met, things were going a little south in your first marriage, and you did have to move suddenly to Tennessee. And because of circumstances being the way they were, I was the only one available to help you move, and I did. And we got your stuff into a pod, one of those moving pods, and you lived on the second story of a 2-story apartment building that had a very, very narrow walkway. So getting your couch out of that thing was a real pain, and it was a big couch.
It was a
sectional.
It was a knuckle scraper.
Oh my! Well, the getting it out the door wasn't even the hard part. It was getting it down the stairs
Yes,
with just you and I. It was 2 people and 2 guys, but we did it. But yeah, I didn't know about the collection of stuff. I didn't know.
That stuff, yeah. I mean, because you saw the stuff that was here when I came back
For a minute, yeah.
Yeah, but the stuff I had a real good chunk of things that did not make the return trip.
That sucks.
And it was several boxes, and I'm still disappointed to this day because, again, those were a lot of childhood memories, a lot of stuff that my mom bought me, my late mom. And so that hurt.
Rest in peace, Marie.
Yeah.
But Marie.
Yeah.
Sorry. Like, don't want to disrespect your mother. I knew your mother.
Yeah.
But I never called her by her first name. It was always Sister Meshki. But no, with that, so many of the things that we grew up with are so special to us. I collected a few things, if you've seen on my drafting table, because I draw. Like some of the old McDonald's, like, Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, that change into like Superman and Wonder Woman and Batman. And I love those things. Are precious. They're precious little memories.
Back when McDonald's made really good toys and they had a play area, so not only would you get a toy with your Happy Meal, if you were good to your parents and your parents were like, okay, 5-10 minutes, you can go play in the balls. And you have fun sliding down slides and stuff like that. Those are memories. I mean, we could have a whole episode of McDonald's itself, but at the time, McDonald's would make some pretty damn good toys.
Yeah.
After the Batman movies, after the Superman cartoons, again, the Disney block, they must have made toys for each cartoon, because I do remember, I didn't have any Tailspin ones, but I did have Chip and Dale's Rescue Rangers. I did have DuckTales. I did have Darkwing Duck.
I think I put up an image on our first episode because we were talking about the McDonald's stuff. I think Burger King did those.
Oh, okay.
Like there were different licensing agreements with different companies at that time, but I think that was with them, if I'm not mistaken. It could have been McDonald's, but one of the block shows went with a different distributor at the time.
I know Burger King did, like that, sent you that commercial. They actually said, okay, with a purchase of a Happy Meal, you can get a VHS of a Ninja Turtles, 2 episodes on a VHS for 99 cents extra. So they had the Ninja Turtles IP, so they would have the toys and the VHS.
Those are VHS for something like that. 2 episodes would be like $20 to $30 back then too. So like, you were getting a good deal. It was a good
very
deal.
Good deal. 99 cents.
Man, I'm telling you. But no, it's see, and these are the memories these shows bring up. That's why I love talking about them. That's why we love doing this. But there's a lot of fun memories, and so much of this stuff, because they were mass produced, you can find on eBay. The Darkwing Duck stuff, there's some fun. I have a couple Funko Pops that are Darkwing Duck, and I, Didn't want to get into Funko Pops, but they had a couple that I really liked. I'm like, dang it, and I just ended up picking them up. But I definitely have the Darkwing one and the Duck, and yeah, they're really fun. But it was a fun show because it was not mocking, but parodying, mimicking, while also walking its own path of something that we all knew and loved and that was hot at the time, which was Batman.
Now, let me ask you this, though, because I'm having trouble remembering it, even though you're talking about it. He did do the thing where he would, after sometimes just getting a case solved or catching a supervillain, or right before he would go medieval on a supervillain, he says, I am the, what was his catchphrase?
I am the terror that flaps in the night.
There you go!
And then he would have like a metaphor. I am the duck in your coffee.
Yeah, he'd change it every time.
Yeah, then he goes, I am Darkwing Duck. Yeah. Oh, God, he was funny. And the actor is the same actor that was in, he did a lot of things. Jim Cummings. Yeah, he definitely had some fun moments. And the way he would switch into his costume is his lounge chair in his living room would flip around and spin. And
he'd pop
him out. But no, it was a good show. And it was very innovative. And again, the only kind of original show on the Disney block that was created by the show creators that didn't come from previous animated characters, films, strips, comic strips, whatever. It was completely original. And yeah, it's kind of funny because it, again, tapped into, like I said, the zeitgeist of the time, Batman and the parody of that, and, mixing it with Duck. Who would have thought, like, mixing DuckTales with Batman would work?
No idea. I mean, it was a definite reach, but for it to work, again, it had to be good writing, it had to be good animation, and obviously it was both, and good character development too. Yeah. On all aspects, because again, like you brought up Gizmo Duck being that robot, RoboCop on one wheel. Yeah. And and he had, he could fly. He had, sometimes his fist would go in and then a missile would pop out.
Yeah. He was like a mixture of RoboCop and Inspector Gadget.
Correct.
It was another great 80s.
Didn't he have like a wing too? He could fly or something like that?
Yeah, he could fly. I think he could fly at some point. Yeah, he did. There were a lot of throwbacks to that. And I kind of always wondered why there wasn't a standalone Gizmo Duck spinoff.
There could have been.
Yeah, I don't know why, if they're like, nah, maybe he's not enough. Because they did give him supporting characters within DuckTales. He had his mother, because I think he lived in a trailer park. It was a kind of a funny origin. And he was just kind of like this sad sack and stumbles into intrigue and into the suit that I think one of the characters, the inventor on DuckTales, comes up with. And I think he develops that suit, and then it ends, because it's supposed to be like a security thing for Scrooge's vault, if I remember correctly. If not, correct me in the comments. But yeah, it was interesting. It was an interesting mix of characters, and new and old, and it just really hit, man. I always loved it.
Yeah, it was a really good show, and for its run, I think it was a staple on the block, and it was definitely a show. Getting back to the origination of this segment was, you'd run home for it, especially when they were brand new episodes. They weren't in syndication running reruns. First couple of years, you're running home to see it because it's an awesome cartoon. Yeah, no, it really was, and I think with Darkwing Duck, it aired in 91 to 92, and it had 3 seasons, but it was in that period where Batman Returns was going to come out too, so they were still building hype around Batman and anything Batman related, which I think only helped this show. Oh yeah, it got some extra shine, that's for sure. Yeah, and it was great, but yeah, that's one of the childhood favorites. We have a lot of childhood favorites coming, because I think what's going to happen next is we're going to start doing the Batman the Animated Series and the first iteration, like I said before. So that's going to be coming soon. We want to say thank you so much again for tuning in to TNT, the K-Cow Kids. We hope you enjoyed this. Please like, share, subscribe, do all the things if you can. It really helps us out. Comment anything. If you love us or you hate us, please go ahead and tell us in the comments. Once again, I'm Ty Justice. I'm Todd Fox. For TNT, the K-Cow Kids, thanks for watching.